Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online event with the European heating industry. I am the moderator of the session. My name is Peter Weiss, and I work for Rudd Peterson Public Affairs here in Brussels. And I will introduce to you a great panel who will be discussing the topic with me. First of all, we've got a member of the European Parliament, Pernille Weiss, who is the Danish member of the Parliament, and she sits on the Environment Committee. So thanks for joining us, Pernille. We also have Bertrand Schmidt, who is the CEO of the company called BDR Thermia. Thank you for joining, Bertrand. And finally, we have Karlis Goldstein, who is a member of cabinet of the Commissioner for Energy, Kadri, Simson. But before we start our discussion, I'm going to let Federica Sabati take a few minutes of our time just to present to you a report that is coming out today.
Thank you, Peter, and welcome to everyone attending this event, which is very exciting because to us today it's a double birthday. First and the most important is for this heating market report. This is our first heating market report, and we're very proud of it because, as you know, and this is the topic of today's conversation, we will be talking about decarbonization of the building sector, specifically the heating sector. We know that this is the most significant challenge that we have as Europe to face in order to reach the climate goals for buildings in 2050, but also in 2030. And so far, we haven't had any comprehensive overview of what the challenge looks like. So we thought we put together a set of data, which now turns out to be the first publicly available largest data on the heating stock in Europe. And then start the debate on figures, let's say on numbers. We know that there's an estimated 66 million installed heating appliances in Europe, which are inefficient, they're too old, mostly based on fossil fuels, out of about 100 million. So it's quite a relevant share of the stock. And therefore, we also know that we must accelerate the replacement rate of these inefficient appliances. Otherwise, we will never reach the 2050 goals for CO2 emission reduction, and certainly also not the 2030, which right now are being revised by the European institutions. There are no solutions, so no single solution that fits everything. Europe is very rich in terms of energy infrastructure, in terms of types of buildings, in terms of climates. Yes, it's so I would say that Europe is very rich in terms of climate, in terms of types of buildings, in terms of energy infrastructure. And there is not a single solution that works for everything, but there's many technical solutions. And Pernille is making a strange face, therefore the sound must be funny. Is it better now?
It needs the mic turning on.
Yes.
Okay, carry on.
That's good. Yeah. And this is why we put together this report, in order to show, on the one hand, the size of the problem, but also, on the other hand, the size of what we can actually do. In the report, we also talk about our vision as industry for 2050 with 2030, very first in our priority, on our priority list. And in this vision, we identify 7 priority areas, and I think today we will talk about several of them, but certainly the first one, which for us is priority, and that is the acceleration of the modernization of the stock of old heaters installed in Europe. This is why I'm very happy that we could host a member of the European Parliament that is actually been active on these topics in the latest weeks. representative of the Commission and one of our CEOs, because I think with your backgrounds and the recent debates, you can certainly give us much more of an input in what we can do and how we can do, particularly with the renovation wave, to accelerate the modernization of the stock. So thank you, Peter, for this introduction. One thing, if you can find the report, I think online already on the right-hand side of your screen, but it will also be sent to our participants afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much, Federica. So the timing of this discussion is great for two reasons. One is there is a great report out today that you're going to look at, but also because the European Commission next week will be making a big splash with a number of communications and initiatives announced, most notably the renovation wave. So as a first round of questions to each of the speakers, I'm going to ask what they would like to see in the renovation wave communication when it comes out. And if I'm wrong on timing, Karlis is going to put me right. But basically, there's a lot of anticipation. And first of all, I'm going to ask Pernille to say something about it, because she has been involved in the European Parliament's own initiative report on maximising the energy efficiency of building stock. So, Pernille, you go first.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you all for joining this very important webinar. I really hope that we can start a ripple effect that will work at least for the next couple of weeks, so that the renovation wave, when it comes into our hands, is really being embraced with energy from us politicians, so that we can set up a great team of colleagues like we did in the opinion. Actually, I would like to actually, he's maybe not with us, I guess, but the rapporteur, Kieran Kufu from the Greens from Ireland, an architect by education. I would like to actually address a thank you to him, because we had a very good atmosphere doing the opinion report. And to your question, Peter, well, actually, just a short note on why am I doing what I'm doing. I'm in the Committee of Environment, but I'm also a member of the ITRA, the Energy and Research and Industry Committee. And that's a great combination for a person like me, who is the carpenter's daughter back home from Denmark. And I have worked as a nurse in many, many years, and also done a lot of evidence-based design consultancy, because I've made it as a specialty of mine that I know a lot about how the built environment affects us socially, emotionally, health related, but also our money. Actually, the facility management has been a part of my envelope for many, many years. So that's why I engaged so deeply into the energy efficiency of the building stock. Also, because that is actually right now the best way to decarbonize the European society, as well as it also one of the most strong tools to create new jobs. And we need that now in the coronavirus recovery. 1 million spent on energy efficiency on the building stock can actually create 19 jobs. So that's also what I'm looking forward to see in the renovation wave papers and documents and process plans, that we can see that we will have a great speed actually on working with all the ideas that we put into the opinion report. I will actually say that it is a big bouquet of political compromises and ideas of what we need to do to have the CO2 cut, to improve people's homes and workplaces, but also to work with the energy poverty anxiety that is around in a lot of cities and regions, as well also around in Europe. So I look very much forward to see that the Commission really took on board the opinion report, so that we can continue in the good creative spirit that we had in the spring and before summer break, making the report. It is so important that in this week, when we finalized our voting on the EU climate law, that we very soon begin to actually deliver results. And the Renovation Way is a centerpiece of the climate law work to be done. So I look very much forward also to hear from the industry. What are your hopes? Because we put a very big effort into the SMEs that we will like to have one-stop shops and logical guidance in how to assess a building stock and how to co-create with the building owner and the tenants about how to get started. Because there's a lot of myths, there's a lot of speculations around is my home, is my building going to have a deep or a stage renovation? What about the perspectives of this? And first and foremost, also, of course, it's a matter of financing. Where is the business model for people with their homes and their buildings to see that they can both cut down on energy and contribute to the climate change, but actually also that they can save money and have better homes and better, healthier workplaces. So I look very much forward to that. Thank you, Peter, for inviting.
A pleasure, Pernille. Thank you. And we'll come back to some of the issues that you've touched upon there later in the discussion. So Bertrand Schmidt, you're the CEO of a big company that's making these sorts of appliances. Please, could you tell us what you would like to see in the Renovation Wave initiative? And I think
maybe to give you a little bit of context. Can you hear me? Yeah, right. Thanks, Peter, for inviting me. Thanks, Federica. So yes, we know that buildings use 40% of all energy in Europe, and the major driver is space and water heating. So if we want to reach our climate goals, we have definitely to do something about that. And it's not a new insight we have. And as the European heating industry, we are very much aware that we have a major role to play here. We have decided to be a part of the solution. So we employ 125,000 people directly in our companies, 40 companies, 13 associations. We invest €1 billion per year in innovation, and that's new technologies, make products more connectable. And I can tell you, when I meet, and my colleagues, when we meet the new young engineers who join the companies, we see a lot of energy coming into the wish of young people to contribute to that. So for us, it's definitely not difficult to find people who want to work on this. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of know-how. So today, 2/3 of the heating systems in Europe are inefficient. We know that. That's 66 million, as Federica already stated. So these inefficient heat generators create a lot of carbon footprint. So every year, a bit more than 1 million new heating generators are installed in new houses. And when you make a new house, it's pretty easy to do everything right. You make great isolation, you make the best windows, you make a good roof. You invest in a very energy efficient system, mostly a heat pump or similar, and that's easy. I would say, yeah, we have the solution, and there the legislation has been driving that in the last years. And I think all the industry has really embraced that. What's a little bit more tricky is that 4 million of these devices that we sell every year in Europe are only replacement. And these replacements, maybe to know, is 50% of these replacements are very often done in a hurry. Because people say, well, you know what, my device, I'm going to replace it later. It still works, it's fine. And what very often happens, it's we invest in Europe, so mostly just before Christmas time, a day before your family comes in, well, you have a little problem, your boiler breaks down. This is when the total chaos begins, and people start try to do some solutions. So why is that? I come to that later. So what's easy in a building, and a new building, because you plan that beforehand, is more difficult in an older building. First, you have a lot of different building types, depending on which geographical footprint you're in. If you're in the Northern Europe, you have another type of building than you might have in the south of Portugal. And so these buildings are very different, and there's not one single solution that you can use for that. So you need a little bit time to think ahead and to say, okay, how I'm going to do this perfectly. You have to analyze the situation. There are people who are capable of doing that. Our installers, specifiers, also architects are very competent. And then they can come up and make the right solution for people. So that's feasible, but the more you have time pressure on these things, the more difficult it gets. It's not impossible, but you know how difficult it is today to get an installer. It's not because they are bad people, it's because they are very busy. So if you give them the chance to plan ahead, they will do a great job. If you put them under time pressure, the job will be probably a little bit less well done. And then you can do the math by yourself. If you replace 4% of the 100 million devices that are installed today from the old stock per year, you will replace over 10 years 40 million, and fortunately you replace especially the ones that are inefficient. And if you increase that by every percent, well, that's 10 million more devices that you will have replaced with the same effect on the carbon footprint. So that's simple math. So what's holding us back? I would like to say, and it sounds a little bit, I don't want to sound arrogant, but as an industry, we are definitely ready. As I said, we invest €1 billion per year, and not since yesterday. We have been doing that for years in modern and efficient technology. We have technology, we have heat pumps, we have hybrid solutions where you combine a heat pump with a gas boiler. We can also have hybrids where you combine a gas boiler with solar thermal solutions. We have biomass solutions. We have high efficiency boilers. The latter, these ones you can run with gas, and that might be not the solution of the future, but you can also run them with biogas, which is definitely a good solution. And then you can even run them in the long term with a blend of hydrogen, which only produces water, as you know. And in the long run, you can even have a boiler running fully on hydrogen. So it's all about what are the right solutions. We think there are many different solutions, which gives a lot of pressure to us as companies to develop all of them. But we believe there's not one silver bullet that you can just shoot and solve the problem. So as an industry already, the professionals, all these people who do the planning, who do the installation, who do the commissioning, and who do servicing, these people are also ready. But as I said, there are not so many of them here. And actually, it's an amazing thing when you imagine that in Europe, we are talking about unemployment, and then we have let's say a group of people who are not available to do the job. So we think there's a good idea of, let's say, getting maybe people who might be facing unemployment to bring them into the installation job. And what we are doing as an industry here, we are training regularly. So more than 100,000 of these installers are trained every year to be capable of installing our solutions. And what is then the problem? We think that the problem is very easy. If you want to make sure that the end user, who in average, I got the numbers, maybe you might have better numbers, but I investigated, and the medium net equalized yearly income of a family in Europe seems to be 17,500 euros per annum. If you have an investment for a new heating system between 1,000, 3,000, sometimes even more euros, that's a pretty heavy investment. And we always take the example in the industry, say, well, if a family has to decide whether they, let's say, go on vacation or buy a new heating equipment in summer, that's a heavy decision for them. So they would rather go on vacation, and then in winter, when the system breaks down, maybe they replace it. And if it's okay, it's okay. But I think, or what we think as an industry is, if we can make sure that people are able to invest in that because they are ready, but also we have to make them capable of doing that, and in the same time give us as an industry visibility, then I think we can replace more products and get closer to what we want to do. So two big effects. If you do more scrappage and you replace old systems by new ones, well, you get more modern and efficient heating systems in all the buildings, which, by the way, if you tell them the buildings of today, we expect 95% of these buildings still being there in 2050, meaning if we don't do anything about them, in 2050, we would have still very poor installations. And so that would reduce dramatically the carbon emissions. And the second thing, we believe that this can create a lot of good jobs for the whole 1.8 million people that are already working in this industry.
Great. Thank you. We come back to you. Don't worry, there's going to be another opportunity. So we've basically we come to you, Karlis, and I would say no pressure. You know, people have high expectations of this renovation wave. If I may just, by way of introduction, say this: there is a directive today called the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive that basically regulates the new buildings. But what this renovation wave presumably is going to focus on exclusively is the existing building stock. And for that, is there, this is quite new, is it not? Karlis, over to you. What should we expect?
Well, thank you very much. I think that what you should expect depends on where you come from, in a way, because there's a huge number of stakeholders. I mean, if you speak to individual people, they very much realize that renovation, but also at the time of COVID, people's health starts at their home. So, and if you speak to national administrations, the picture is completely different. I mean, the way that they address either energy poverty or housing policy is a different level and aggregation level discussion. Thanks very much to you and to Pernille for providing this holistic overview of the complexity by referencing to the Parliament's own initiative report. And thank you to Bertrand for highlighting the technical challenges associated. And I completely agree that it's much easier to build something future-proof from the ground up rather than having to go back and revisit a century-old house and figuring out what types of technical solutions would work there. What's interesting with the renovation wave is that, as Pernille suggested, we have the decarbonization objective, but we also have an urgency of getting things on the ground very quickly. So from the renovation wave, you could expect that we try to cover to our best capacities both the short-term and the long-term challenges and everything that lies between. Pernille had a very nice metaphor of ripples. I hope we can get to the wave from the ripples. It will be a communication now that the Commission is working on and will announce, which means that it will not be legislative acts just yet. But let me say a couple of words on what will be there. So accompanying the communication, there will be guidance on energy poverty, first of all. Secondly, the Commission will publish the implementing and delegated acts for the Smart Readiness Indicator. As well, there will be a staff working document timed for the same date on EU financing for renovation. And fourth, not least important, will be the module on the Commission supporting member states on the Recovery and Resilience Fund resources for renovation projects. The latter will not be an act, it will be something in the Commission website, so to say. But I'm personally very curious because the Recovery and Resilience Fund is going to be instrumental in getting the renovation wave rolled out quickly. The figures have been provided already, but just to give you the scale of renovation, we're speaking about approximately 220 million building units, so apartments, houses, etc., which are older than 20 years. So before any type of efficiency or renewables legislation came into being, which means that we have a huge task ahead of us. So what I expect, and coming to your initial question, from the renovation wave is to really start the discussion at multiple levels. Reaching out to member states, that's second nature to the Commission. But working with the communities, with the neighborhoods, with the citizens, with the municipalities, that's really where the power lies. Don't get me wrong, the Commission is there to help and do anything in our capacity to facilitate, but the actual need has to come from the ground. The actual deployment will have to come on the ground. So we're looking at, now with the revised 55% greenhouse gas reduction target for the next 10 years, we're looking at an investment gap of 275 billion per year. And you can't expect all of that coming from the EU budget, but we do have a couple of interesting tools at our disposal. So the Next Generation EU fund, which is 750 billion euros, has 1/3 focus on climate action, and for the member states to plan, to program how much of that should go to renovation. Very quickly on the renovation wave, because I don't want to be too long, the areas of intervention that the text itself will address will be, first of all, information aspects, legal certainty, and regulation. In the regulation part, you could expect the Commission to look at the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, which we plan to revise by the end of next year, so end of 2021. Then the Energy Efficiency Directive, which, for example, contains the energy performance obligations, issues such as public buildings renovation requirements, and information for end consumers. And we'll also look at the Renewable Energy Directive, because that has the requirements on delivered end-use renewable and waste energy. So that last two acts I mentioned, EED and RED, are already announced. They will be reviewed, revised in accordance to the new 2030 target in the middle of next year. So half a year ahead of the EPBD.
Okay.
And so one important point that Pernille mentioned was technical assistance and one-stop shops. This is now really important because one-stop shops can be different. They don't necessarily have to comply with what we think a one-stop shop should be, because the one-stop shop ideally is something close to the ground, addressing the needs of the users. But we'll work with EIB to set up a one-stop shop for funding. So basically about sharing information about the easiest, quickest, most appropriate financing streams. Then, of course, on top of that, you could imagine something like a competence center. So technical knowledge, where could you find your best carpenter? But that's sort of in the remit for the local authorities and member states to add on as a module or build upon. And then maybe some three important areas of action for the Commission.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah. You can say a few words by all means, but we want to go back to Pernille and see what she's going to make of this.
No, I can cut now. I mean, if you prefer to have discussions with Pernille right now, I mean, I'm happy to facilitate.
I didn't want to stop you, but you know, what I've heard so far is a lot of communication, technology centers, one-stop shops. They're all things which I mean, there's so many questions to ask. Pernille, have you got questions to ask about what's in it? Having heard what you have, I didn't hear any mention of money. I didn't hear, you know, obligations, targets on the member states. Are these not something you would expect to see? Over to you, Pernille.
Thank you. Well, actually, that has been a part of the debates and the voting this week, actually, on the Recovery and Resilience Fund, because what is the part of that who is going to be that are going to be used on climate change, and also the part that goes to digital transformation. And there is a lot of also in the opinion report we made about smart solutions for the building stock, and that's also a part of the digital implementation of new skills and new tools. So I have my yes hat on when I hear the messages, but of course I would like to hear a little bit more about concrete legislation. And how we as parliamentarians can actually begin to co-create with each other, because we are also representatives of the citizens who is reaching out for what can I do with my own building stock, with my home, to have it both more energy efficient, more climate friendly, but also to support my health and social environment. So I think it's important that we now go into the next phase of this parliamentary term, where we do more co-legislative things so that people can actually follow and see that we are doing a change. That is a remark, but today I have my yes hat on. I don't speculate in what I don't hear, but I try to hear also what is from the Commission side. One question I would like to address, and that is the ghost of the ETS as a tool that solves all problems. I think it's so important that we understand that when it comes to energy efficiency and decarbonization through our building stock, that ETS cannot be and must not be included in the ETS, because we have technologies. You use ETS when you do not have yet the right incentives and technologies, but we do have all we need almost. We just need to pull the puzzles together. So I would like to hear what is maybe coming from the Commission side, so that we can actually take the ghost of the ETS and throw it away and put it to other sectors where it's more relevant to use it. Because sometimes I hear also that the citizens, they don't understand why the building sector is so negative towards the ETS, because then they sound the industry as if they actually don't want to decarbonize, and that is actually not the logic. So we need some bulletproof commitment to be a silver bullet. Is from the fairy tales that if something is articulated as a silver bullet, it cannot do the trick. It's only true love and a pure heart that can go. So ETS is actually a true silver bullet, and it must be put to the side on the matter of building stocks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pernille. Karlis, I come straight back to you. Is the renovation wave going to be clear about whether or not the building sector will be brought under the EU ETS, the emissions trading system? Because the communication of 17th of September was vague on that, didn't say what the Commission would do. Is this going to add anything?
Well, thanks. I mean, on your first remark that you had before giving the floor to Pernille, I'd say that talking about 1/3 investment out of 750 billion euros is not by any means insignificant. But funding aside, I mean, your question about the EU ETS is something that keeps popping up quite regularly. And today I cannot give you an answer, first of all, because the communication isn't out. I hope that that's for obvious reasons. But secondly, it's something that the Commission services will still need to do an impact assessment of. So without disclosing too much of the communication, I can tell you that it's a work that lies ahead. It's not something that we're going to solve in the next week.
Yeah, thank you. And you're quite right. The recovery and resilience funds are substantial. The question is how much of it is going to be earmarked for the renovation of the financing the renovation wave. Specifically, it's an initiative about which lots of noise has been made, but really I would expect there to be some sort of earmarking of those funds or amount within those funds that will be dedicated to this purpose. And that's something which, of course, is, at the moment, announcements are being made galore, but I'm really interested to know whether the money is going to be there first, specifically for this purpose, and secondly, what the obligations might be that see the realization of this renovation wave. As Pernille was saying, it needs to be pinned down on what obligations on whom, on member states, on energy fuel suppliers, or on the industry that makes the appliances. All sorts of choices have to be made, and it would be obviously interesting to know what those choices will be as of next week, hopefully. So, Pernille, have you got anything else now? Or should we go to Bertrand here? Bertrand, would you like to just say a word, having heard our interventions? Both Karlis and Pernille have spoken twice.
Well, maybe one side from the heating industry is what I remember, and I joined that type of industry only 3 years ago. I remember when whatever has been prepared in a country to change something on regulations, subsidy schemes, or whatever, all it was the best intentions of the world. When these things are in the make, that leads very often to holding back an investment. So the only thing I can tell you, whatever comes out, and I'm confident that you will come out with the right and good things, it should be clear and lead to some clear, let's say, investments in the market. Because the longer you wait with whatever you do, the more you create uncertainty, and usually this creates a stop in investment. That's what we perceive from a market, and that's very logical. If people say maybe next year I can get a subsidy of 50%, where today I get nothing, well, I understand the people who say I'm waiting until next year, if that's just as an example. So for us as an industry, I think we have proven to be very adaptable to whatever happens. You know, most of the companies that we represent have been making coal ovens 50 years ago, have been making oil boilers, have been making gas boilers. Now we make heat pumps. We have fully connected products. So I think we can adapt to that. But if we get a certainty on where the voyage is going, that helps us a lot, because we can do whatever is necessary. We are flexible.
So Pernille, can I ask you, are you in favor of targets on member states, for example? Is this something that will really focus their minds?
Oh, that's a hot topic. To be honest, personally, I am in favor of national targets, because the problem is that we have promised to renovate of annual rate of 3%, but it's not happening. So, and that's what also worries me about the culture around politics in Europe, that we say we want to do something, but we don't deliver. So, to be honest, I would actually like to have binding targets also nationally. But I know I don't agree with the rest of my group, or vice versa. But I think also because, and then we're back to the good arguments for energy renovation of the building stock, is that it is more than a kinder egg. You buildings, you social change, you create jobs, you recover from COVID. And actually also we can make a EU a kind of not only a living lab, but a living showroom of how to use less energy in the whole world. So we must also see the export potential that there is in energy efficiency of the building stock. To be honest, because the rest of the globe scales, and if they don't see we use our own solutions, well, then we lose the export chances that are just out on the market. So yes, I am put to binding targets, to be honest, because there are so many benefits from doing energy renovation, and because we have tried to just promise to deliver, but that actually didn't succeed. So yeah, I'm a hardliner on that one.
And I must say, from the experience of the last 10, 15 years, the renewable energy targets for every member state have had an amazingly successful effect. They've really held the member states down and made them invest in renewable energy, with all the benefits that we see now in renewable energy. But I know targets are rather an anathema to some. But at the same time, it's got to be very concrete measures. Some people have got to have some sorts of obligations, because if the technology is there and we're willing to make the money available, we've got to make sure that the money isn't used just to make people renovate their houses for aesthetic reasons. It's got to be renovation that makes a difference in CO2 emissions. And in a way, the payments might even be conditional upon there being a reduction of CO2 emissions. But one idea I explore with you, if I may, all of you, and Bertrand, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. You said there were 66 million inefficient heating appliances in Europe today. Do you know which houses they're in? I mean, is it not perhaps reasonable to engage, for instance, the idea of an inspection regime where every house would be checked, and there would at least be knowledge then of whose houses deserve some sort of financial incentive to renovate? Do you know where those 16 million houses are? Or do you just know that that's approximately what there are and you don't know where they are?
Well, I couldn't tell you exactly where all of them are, but we have means of finding out where they are. That's not so complicated. You just look at the age of the houses, and then you have a pretty good view on that. And it's never one central person that makes that. It's about, I talked about 1.8 million professionals that are working on this. If you roll out a program so that we have a pretty efficient value chain to make that happen, you know, if tomorrow there's something happening on new build, I just give you an example. We know exactly where it happens, which is easier because then you have projects. On renovation, we know exactly, because that's 70–80% of the market is just renovation, where we are today reactive and we could be proactive in the future through installers, through project leaders, through service teams. We have almost half of the products that are in the market are serviced or by us or by our competitors or by, let's say, service companies. And if you service a product, you know exactly how old it is and which state it is. So it's, for a large part of the buildings, yes, we're able to do that. Yeah, definitely.
But it might be an idea to sort of undertake energy audits of houses in order to tell people how they might be able to save money by investing in new equipment. Is that another idea that gains any support? Pernille, is that the sort of thing you'd like to have, energy audits? It does happen in the Energy Efficiency Directive for companies, but not in existing housing stock.
Well, I am curious to actually examine that possibility more in depth. So I'm open. I haven't actually thought that much on that idea, but I will definitely look closer. Thank you.
It was just an idea among so many that we could use. But I think, if you remember, the Court of Auditors has recently criticized the spending of money on energy efficiency by member states because it hasn't really been focused on savings of energy, performance, if you like. Money's been given, but then there hasn't really been great emphasis put on the results of that renovation. Has it moved the needle in terms of energy efficiency? And I think that's something which any modern instrument would presumably have. So, Karlis, you did hear the emissions trading question has been addressed. Taxes, I believe the Energy Taxation Directive is up for review as well. Any thoughts? It's a directive that's difficult to change because it requires unanimity, but it's definitely, surely in need of a revisit after about 10, 15 years since it was last amended. Karlis, your mic's off. Okay, I'll go. Pernille, perhaps while Karlis is getting his mic to work, is taxation a road you'd like to go down? You weren't too keen on the emissions trading idea. Taxation is another idea, but of course, there will be downsides of that. I think in terms of energy poverty, your report flagged those, did it not?
Yeah, can you be a little bit more specific, Peter,
well,
on what you mean on?
are you in favor of
taxation,
higher?
because the Danish flag on that is always that. Of what? I don't hear.
I'm sorry. No, I was just really trying to check whether you would be in favor of higher taxes on energy. Would that help your renovation wave?
Well, and that would create a lot of difficult side effects. And being a Danish conservatives, I don't like taxes at all. And I definitely do not like if tax policy is being transferred into an EU question. That's a national competence. What I would like to do always is to make both the healthy and the cost efficient and the best for climate and environment choices the cheapest on the market. So that's where I come from, and that's how I work with that. I'm not a socialist, so therefore I don't like higher taxes and limiting people's personal choices. I would like to make as I said, the greenest and the healthiest choices the most available, also in prices, and that's where we can use also one of these suggestions that is in the report that I hope Karlis has also seen, namely that we agree on, and that we should have a climate calculator, so that every solution being developed to energy efficiency can actually be labeled in a way so that the buyers, the market knows which one of the solutions is actually best fitted to make contribution to save CO2, because we need life cycle economy and circular economy to get into the equation, so that when we renovate our homes and houses, we cut down on energy, but we also support the broader picture of the climate and environmental challenges that are linked to circular economy and life cycle economy. And that's also where we find other sources of finance, because it links to sustainable financing schemes, because we have huge building stocks besides from residential homes that are more complex, and where we also need to find extra finance from more heavy capital partners.
Yeah.
So no higher taxes for normal people.
Okay. Thank you, Pernille. Message received and understood. But of course, I think it is on the list of the Commission to revisit the Energy Taxation Directive. So I just park that to one side, if I may. Can I talk for a few minutes about fuels? We've tended to talk about technologies, different types of appliances. What about fuels? I mean, let me be really blunt, and I'm drawing inspiration from one of the questions we've received from Sanjeev Kumar, who's one of the people who asked the question about using fossil fuels, and he's framed his question in terms of fossil fuel subsidies. But I think of a fossil fuel like natural gas. Isn't between now and 2050, we should be phasing natural gas out of the energy fuels used in housing completely? Bertrand, I wonder if you could say something about the fuels, how you're going to decarbonize those, because surely climate neutrality implies no natural gas by 2050 in the building sector.
Yeah, that's right. And we say the following: we cannot. That's what we like to say. Okay, there's the first law of thermodynamics that says that you cannot create or destroy energy. You can only transform it. So we tend to say, well, it has all to be all electric. And so electric is just a carrier that you can use to carry energy somewhere, and so is a gas. And you can say if you burn a fossil fuel, that's not good because it creates CO2. Okay, fine. Then you can create a lot of fuels or whatever gases that will not create CO2, or you can create a circle this is feasible. I mentioned that in the beginning. We've experimental activities. We have pilots all over Europe. That's even, okay, I know the UK is leaving the European Union, but they are investing heavily also in a hydrogen infrastructure, because they know that if you have a lot of solar energy or wind energy that is by, let's say, by logically not available when you need it, you have to store it somewhere. So one possibility is to get that somehow in big battery parks, which is apparently not that easy. You pump it somewhere up in water, or you say, I'm going to transform it into hydrogen, where you lose 20-30%, but then once it's in hydrogen, you can use it or as such, or let's say, use it again for fuel cells. So there's a lot of technologies around that, if you look at in an age of 10, 20 years, that make a lot of sense. I've discussed, it was just 2 weeks ago with a Dutch gas network driver. It's the Gasuni, and they're pretty straightforward on it, and they see a lot of electrolyzer capacity being built up in the next decades, because it doesn't go next week. And they even see that the price of a kilowatt day is very expensive, even if you use every good technology, could go down to a certain level. Even so, and it comes back to what do you do with carbon that's produced if it's today, if it doesn't cost anything to produce carbon, if there is no counter, then you just these technologies will never take off. So there will be something on carbon pricing that has to develop in the next years. And that's something also we as a EHI are definitely in favor to say, yes, you have to make something on pricing carbon, because otherwise there's a part of the whole thing that you're building when you heat or when you transform energy in a way that is not taken care of. And because that part has a very negative effect on our climate, we have to do something about that. So coming back, yes, technology-wise, there are a lot of good solutions coming. They will take time. And in the meantime, we have to do something with the solutions that we have. And that includes, we think, as a heating industry, for the next 5, even 10 years, also high efficiency gas boilers. That's a part of it, but definitely not the only solution, because that would be wrong.
Okay, I noted what you said, particularly about the carbon pricing. I mean, that's interesting, because indeed, forgive me saying so, Pernille, but that's a little bit what the inclusion of buildings in the emissions trading system would be designed to give, is some sort of carbon pricing signal. But I park that. You've said what you think about that. But just moving slightly onto digitalization and an idea, this smart readiness indicator, Karlis, could you expand a little bit on that? You referred to it earlier. Has digital got a part in this renovation wave?
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Very loud. There's a bit of a background noise, but I can hear you very well.
All right. Sorry for the technical glitch there. No, absolutely. Renovation wave has basically 2 pillars. One is the energy transition, and the other the digital transition one. And when we do renovate, then we're hoping that the districts, the communities that are being renovated, so we see that there's a scale effect to going beyond just buildings as such, can indeed become more digital.
Good. It's good to hear the digital component, because everything should have a digital component these days to be successful. But I think indeed there might be digital synergies if you think of hybrid boilers that are both gas-fired and electrically capable, but they would need to be able perhaps to switch between fuels when electricity prices are high, for example, and that presupposes that there is a digitalization, that there is smart metering and things like that that can switch between fuels. But there's one word I haven't heard yet, and I ask you, Pernille, the word scrappage, a scrappage scheme, would that be a word in your lexicon of words that you'd like to read in the innovation wave communication? Do you know what I mean by a scrappage scheme? We do them for cars sometimes. Cars over 15 years get a subsidy if you replace it. Do you think that kind of idea would work not just for old cars, but old boilers?
Definitely. I mean, we need to have tools to kick out worn out technologies, and I like the picture of the resemblance to cars. Also to make people aware of also one of the one-stop shop solutions on how to get started with energy renovation, because I think a lot of initiatives to do energy renovations, especially when it's private homes, is to have a kick start of a kind, and that such scrapping schemes can actually pull the trigger and make the wave start on an actual premise. So I welcome that as an idea to get things started.
For me, it would have the benefit of really targeting the oldest installations. I mean, the threshold might be 15 years, 20 years, I don't know. But it does address the oldest and probably most inefficient boilers or heating appliances. But I think, Karlis, if I was to put the idea in your mind, you'd tell me pretty quickly that scrappage schemes don't happen at the European level. But maybe some links, maybe some European money can be contributing towards member state initiatives. Is that an idea that would gain traction, do you think?
Well, earlier we spoke about the plans that the member states do make. I mean, for example, their plans for the RRF. I'm not specifically an expert on the RRF, but anything that goes towards the climate target could be used to apply funds for that. What I would like to draw to your attention are two figures that the Commission has reached in their reflection. Is that indeed, in order to reach the 2030 target, 4% of heating equipment would need to be replaced annually, and that by the time of 2030, the share of renewables and waste heat, of course, would need to increase to around 40% in the energy mix delivered to buildings. So the Commission has a tradition of not being too technically specific and wanting to maintain the technological neutrality, also in view of the energy mix that member states generate. But we definitely see that there is now a need to push both on the energy efficiency and on the renewable energy front to reach the targets that we have set ourselves.
Thank you. I must say, I'm enthused by this discussion, because now you've made the link with the Recovery and Resilience funds. The member states have to think of ideas, what they can put together as projects. And indeed, if they have a good project, they might receive funding. And a scrappage initiative at the national level, perhaps even at regional levels, might be such a action that would create jobs in the short term. This is very deployable at relatively short notice. So it's an idea I hope member state delegates are listening for, because if it gives them access to these funds, that would be excellent. And I'm pretty well, we're more or less approaching the end of our time. So I really would like to thank everybody for having participated, but most of all the panelists. Thank you for the time. And of course, I have to recommend that everybody grabs a report, one of these, the heating report that's just been published by EHI. It's a good report. I've read it actually, and it's fun. It's fun to read, and you do realize how many options there are out there. I hope any one-stop shop that exists isn't at a pan-European level, because I'd probably want one that, you know, I can access in my member state or even in my region. But the concept of one-stop shops, that sounds attractive. And indeed, you know, there are many other issues which we're all going to be eager to read about in the renovation wave when it comes out. Is it next week, Karlis? Just nod if it is.
It is indeed, next Wednesday.
Excellent. And I believe there are other energy-related initiatives coming out, and an offshore strategy, an offshore wind strategy will be one of those. So it's going to be another big day for us, reading documents, but there will be many ideas in there that we will need to then take forward in a very concrete way. Thank you for listening, everybody. Thank you to EHI for having invited me to moderate, to Frederica and her team, and thanks to all of you listening, but particularly the panelists. So have a great afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining this webinar. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter.